All right, welcome in everybody. It is Friday, March 15th, 2024, quadruple witching day, contract rollover day. Let's go ahead and jump on back. We'll go to yesterday and see what happened here so we can get to our pre-market for this morning. We came in, we had a lot of good clues for the bearish pullback, being that we did have that potential bearish daily signal up from the highs of the day before. We also had 4-hour and hourly bearish signals confirming in the context, obviously, of a strong market. But we did have some clues for the bears, expecting a potential pullback as one of the scenarios if price could not hold above a lot of the levels we were looking at. And sure enough, out of the open here, we got the pullback and basically held right around the 200 and VWAP here, 200 and VWAP. And that began the big push lower. Just so happened that 50% of the day before was also one of our roadmap projection levels up there. And obviously nothing happened there. They parried off of it for a little 2 or 3, 4 tick bounce. And then they came down to get down through the previous daily low and come into our first pocket of expected support. So we did have a pocket here from 52.07 to 52.11, maybe 11.5 in here. This was the larger time frame pocket that I told you would be ideal to see the bulls hold if there was going to be some type of pullback out of the open. So ideally, if the bulls were going to be strong, we would see them hold around 07 to 11. And then if price did get down below there, it opened us up for targets to the downside. So first thing that happened was they held the top end of that first pocket for an attempt to bounce. However, nothing really got very far. It went from that 52.11 level right up to about 52.15. So you might have got a 4-point scalp out of it. And then it just kind of chopped around. So we ducked below that pocket. Then they got back up above it and pulled back and held it here to the tick for this bounce back out. And then it just became a total wonky market. It just kind of chopped around, kept holding 52.11. Interestingly enough, that was our first expected support, the top end of that pocket. And sure enough, held and held and held, and just was a total chop fest for most of the day. And I did warn you guys, and this is not something that is really exclusive to me here. It's pretty obvious. We're moving into this contract rollover. This was the day before the official expiration, right, which is today. And it just petered out and chopped, and it did hold 11 pretty nicely, then hold below it a little bit. But really just super wonky. And then finally, the bulls brought it right up, and this probably would have been the best trade of the day. And that was, not only was it a tag of the VWAP in the context of a bearish market, but we also got a really nice 3-minute and 5/12 bearish signal as it was testing into VWAP there about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the East Coast here. So really great opportunity to short off the back end of VWAP. And then you would have captured this pretty healthy pullback, interestingly enough, right down to one of our major, let me go back to 50% of last week, right? So that is kind of a major dividing line right there, a major line in the sand. Typically, if the bulls can hold above 50% of the week before, it gives us a little bit of a clue for that side of things. And again, sure enough, bears sold off out of the open, tried to hold 52.11 there, the top end of our pocket, and then finally failed off of VWAP to come on down and bounce basically off 50% of the week before. Now they tried to hold it to the tick nearly here. See if we can zoom it in. Tried to hold nearly to the tick off 50%. Very discreet level in the market there. Took a couple ticks of heat. And you actually would have gotten about a 5-6 point bounce off of that for a small scalp. But then, of course, what they have to do a little peek below and bounce back up. So at the end of the day there, you did get one of those really textbook beautiful setups there. A beautiful 38% retracement of the leg nearly to the tick, lining up with the 200 with the crossover, right? So we started to hold from a major level, get that crossover, and got our first test of the 200, which was also that 38 retrace. and then you got a nice push into the end of the day there, coming back up to test into the previous daily low and VWAP. So I think, in my opinion, still a pretty easy day despite the chop that happened here for 2 or 3 hours. There were some great short opportunities out of the open. There were some great opportunities to buy 52.11, the top end of our pocket. And remember, when we draw these pockets on the chart, typically I tell you the top end or the bottom end are where I would want to orient my trade. So either it's going to hold the top end of that pocket within a point or two, or it's going to hold the bottom end. If not, then I'm not interested in a trade in those areas. So the top end, again, worked out beautifully for a number of great trades throughout the day. You got your tag of the VWAP in the bearish market. You even got this little parry off the previous daily close as the bulls tried to recover from the pullback. And then finally, this beautiful opportunity to either buy at the 50% and get a little 5-point scalp, or buy the pullback to the 200 here to see if this was going to be kind of a hold from 50% of the week before for this bounce out. So there were some good opportunities, and even if you didn't buy the 200 here, all of these aggressive pullbacks to the fast moving average could have made you a little bit of money going into the end of yesterday. That brings us here into this morning, or in the overnight session, I should say. And in the overnight session, remember, hopeful it does not print until 6 a.m. Eastern there. So in the overnight session, lots of trouble off the previous daily close. Basically shorting the previous daily close throughout the overnight session gave you a little scalp to the downside. And then finally, we got this parry right off the VWAP for the bounce out. And now, as you can see, just kind of chopping around at this point. They tried to hold off VWAP. Not a surprising scenario here as they were pulling back in the overnight session to find support right around 50% of the day before the 200 and VWAP here, but just not enough strength. And what do you know? They got rejected right off our fast moving average, right? That should be a clue to you if you are buying from that area. If you keep getting rejections from the fast moving average, typically a clue they're going to come and retest the low, get a peak below and bounce, or continue on their merry way to the downside. So far they are continuing to the downside and holding the back end of the previous daily high and 200. So that brings us into Friday here, the quadruple witching contract rollover day. Let's go ahead and jump up to the higher time frames and see what they have to say for this morning.